Book of Deuteronomy are the last words of Moses. It's set in a narrative, but it actually contains very little narrative material. The majority of the book of Deuteronomy are actually the final speeches of Moses, his three final sermons, last will and testament. Very much a homiletical structure, a sermon, very sermon-like. It works very well in a context of covenant renewal and in a worship setting, a liturgical setting. Many have often seen this as a liturgical book. The book of Deuteronomy's organization also reminds us of some other ancient Near Eastern texts. It is very similar to ancient Near Eastern suzerain treaties. A suzerain treaty is when a stronger party or a suzerain makes an agreement with a weaker party or a vassal for protection or trade or whatever it might be. Deuteronomy looks very much like this ancient Near Eastern suzerain treaty. For example, first you have the identification of the suzerain and the identification of the vassal, who's the stronger party, who's the weaker party. You get a history of the relationship between those two parties, as you do in Deuteronomy. You then get the list of stipulations that each party is responsible for in the future. You get provisions for how to remember and how to celebrate this agreement between the two of them. You get a list of divine witnesses. Now, this is something that's missing from Deuteronomy because obviously if you're a monotheistic religion, you can't have other gods bearing witness to your agreements. However, in Deuteronomy and other places, creation stands in. So the mountains bear witness. The mountains testify to the relationship between the suzerain and the vassal, in this case God and Israel. And then at the end you get the list of blessings for obeying this treaty between one another and the list of curses for disobeying the relationship between the two of them. This structure, if you can imagine a treaty plus a law code, you get the book of Deuteronomy. But as always, God is working within the culture of the people to speak in a form that they understood. These suzerain treaties were common in the ancient Near East, so it's just like God to take and experience some form that the people were familiar with to bring about the revelation of himself. The book of Deuteronomy does advocate a very simple formula for life. If you obey, you will be blessed and prosper. If you disobey, you will suffer pain and penalty and you will be punished. That is sometimes called Deuteronomic theology. We're going to talk about that a lot, that simple retributive justice, sometimes called the two ways, the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked. That actually is a theme that actually runs throughout what we're going to call the Deuteronomic history. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings. We see this emphasis on obedience bringing blessing, disobedience bringing punishment. And we're also going to see some other books that want to balance that out. By now you've probably heard me talk about James Sanders. James Sanders is a canonical scholar, and he made a wonderful statement where he says the Bible, the canon, is self-correcting. And what he means by that is the Bible is very good at keeping you from taking it out of context if you read all of it. You know, before you run with this notion of retributive justice and the doctrine of the two ways and believe that that's how the world works, we have these other books like Job and Ecclesiastes and others that provide another voice just to keep you from going too crazy and running too far away from that. In Deuteronomy, another important feature of Deuteronomy is the land. The land is a conditional gift from God. It is wonderfully rich in every way, but keeping it depends on your faithfulness to God. And Torah, remember that God said, God saved them out of Egypt, and now that they are saved, this is the way they need to behave. If they want to keep the land, they need to follow God's Torah. And when they don't follow God's Torah, spoiler alert, God revokes the Exodus. In other words, he sends them back into captivity, into exile in Babylon, and even in some places, Egypt. So that's just an overview and introduction to where we're going in the book of Deuteronomy.